Utah bows to USC, but the Utes still control the South. Will the Trojans be fueled by new life? Will Stanford's run end in a very unlikely pit called Pullman? This is Pac-12 Breakdown. This comes your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on the West Coast, 11 o'clock Eastern Time. We bring in the best bloggers in the Pac-12 to break down what's possibly the best conference in college football. We've got Jack Follman on the line from Pacific Takes and also from the Rebel Media Group, Matt Lozano. Gentlemen, thanks so much for stopping by. Love the breakdown on the Pac-12, and we've discussed it many times. The depth of this conference amazes me, and when I look and compare the games that really count and matter and seem to be intriguing games. Maybe the two teams have dropped off in the standings, but they're still watchable games and very interesting games. The depth is amazing compared to the other conferences where you see 2 or 3 games that you have to watch, and then it really drops off from there. So let's look back to last weekend. Speaking of which, very nice segue. Number 1 team in the conference, number 3 team in all college football, getting number 1 votes, Utah, taking on a USC team that, again, we know better because we know the talent. 3-3 was the record, and we see what happens at the LA Coliseum. Just kind of again, an example of what this conference is all about, Jack. Just your thoughts about USC, Utah, and what stood out to you last weekend.
Yeah, going in, I really liked USC's chances. It seemed just like one of those classic games where a team coming in like Utah was a good team but had been playing a little bit better than they really were, and a team like USC that was better than their record indicated at home with a lot on the line, kind of a must-win for them. And they showed up and played the way that they can, and that was kind of, what I saw coming, and something that, didn't shake up the conference too much, but kind of kept Utah from, locking in the South, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's going to continue to be interesting because if Utah slips up, then we've got all sorts of scenarios which play out. Arizona State obviously lost the head-to-head, but USC is in good shape if that occurs. And, of course, UCLA has yet to play Utah, so the Trojans may become UCLA fans in a hurry. Matt, your thoughts about what happened last weekend with the Trojans?
Well, first of all, I'll start by admitting I'm a little biased here, but I really thought Utah matched up better with SC, especially with some key injuries to both the offensive and defensive line for USC. But I was really impressed with the way they won. I was at the game. The atmosphere in the Coliseum was incredible. So it was good to see that back in the Coliseum. It's unfortunate that it took so much of turmoil, I guess, if you will, to get to that. But I still think Utah, much like we saw, SC when they hammered Arizona State this year, don't count them out completely at all. This conference has just been super rough on everybody this year. We saw Arizona State get, beat down at home by USC, only to go ahead and smack around UCLA the next week. So I don't discount Utah as a good football team at all. I do think it's Stanford's conference to win at this point. And I definitely think Utah, obviously, they're still in the driver's seat in the Pac-12 South, although I do think UCLA is going to be a tough game for Utah. So we'll see how that goes. But I was really impressed with the way the Trojans came back and won this past weekend.
Yeah, Matt, that LA Coliseum atmosphere had to be a complete reversal from what we saw just a week earlier against Washington, because there was a situation where I looked at the game. I finally pulled the trigger on USC, but thought home field advantage means absolutely nothing here. The Trojans have already lost to Stanford, and watching that Thursday night against Washington and seeing empty seat all over the place, and it just didn't seem like much of a home field advantage. But USC obviously turned people showed up to see an undefeated Utah team first and foremost, and then for the Trojans to pull off the upset, or what should have been an upset, but the Vegas guys got it right in regards to the Trojans being a favorite. Jack, Washington, Stanford, the Cardinal again look impressive, shutting down the Washington offense, which we didn't expect to do a whole lot with Jake Browning out of the lineup especially. Washington State, also a team that is jumping out there and causing some waves. They go down to Arizona and win the game. Anything else that stands out from last weekend?
I think that outside of those two, are we looking for what stood out in those two games, or kind of just outside of those games?
Hey, anything you've got for us that jumps out at you?
Okay, I mean, there's Washington State definitely did. I mean, that was the kind of game that that program, hasn't won in a long time, and going on the road and beating, Arizona, who's still at the bottom of that, Power Five pack in the South. That was not something I think a lot of people saw them doing, even though they look better this year. And I think that cemented Washington State as a team that's going to compete in the Pac-12. That was the game, kind of the prove it to me game, I think, to a lot of people, me included, and they proved it. That doesn't mean they're going to beat Stanford this week, but it means that they're a team that can go to a bowl and they can compete with pretty much almost anyone in the Pac-12. So I think that was a really big statement to me.
Hey, Matt, I know you've got an eye on UCLA. Your thoughts about the Bruins, because this has been a Jekyll and Hyde team, and it's understandable, especially considering a freshman at quarterback, but more so the injuries on defense. A team that held its ground against marginal competition coming out of the gate, going 4-0. Then there were trouble signs despite the blowout against Arizona, because the rush defense was exposed. And then we saw it come to fruition the next week at the Rose Bowl against Arizona State. Very close loss. And then I don't know how much we can count the Stanford loss, because the Cardinals just look better and better and better. But then they come back, and against a Cal team that had played that close, one score away at Utah, the Bruins bounce back at home against Cal and really just completely dominate that game.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And I think you touched on it when you talked about the injuries, especially to the defensive line for UCLA, losing Eddie Vanderdoes at the beginning of the year to an ACL tear, losing Miles Jack. Really, you're seeing in the Pac-12 more so than any conference in college football right now. I think you're seeing how these offensive and defensive lines are really what makes or breaks some of these teams. A team like UCLA, I thought was going to absolutely compete for the conference title. But those injuries are huge, and especially to a team like Stanford, we saw what happened. When you can't stop the run, you're going to be in big trouble against teams like that. That's USC's problem, ironically enough, as well as the offensive and defensive lines. Also, I would point out by UCLA, I don't think I think the Jekyll and Hyde comparison, if you will, with UCLA. A lot of people aren't seeing the bigger picture here with Josh Rosen, and I really have been impressed all year with Josh Rosen. But I went out to the spring game for UCLA and USC earlier this year, and one of the biggest things that jumped out to me, Mark, was the complete lack of playmakers out on wide receiver and even tight ends. I mean, Thomas Duarte is very good for UCLA, but Josh Rosen is working with absolutely very little to nothing at the wide receiver position, as opposed to where you get a guy like Cody Kessler. I could argue whether or not he's an NFL caliber quarterback, but every guy he's throwing to in that offense is a 4 or 5 star athlete. That's what the biggest difference is for UCLA this year. I really think Josh Rosen is he's gotten a lot better this year, and they rely heavily on that run game. But it's the offensive and defensive lines and the lack of playmakers on the outside that's kind of holding them back this year. I still love their ability to match up against Utah, but we'll see what they can do from now on. I really do like UCLA to make a run at Utah, and that'll open up the South completely if they are to knock off the Utes.
I think that's a great point, Matt, about the Bruins. The recruiting classes have been what we would expect them to be. Jim Mora has really delivered, but the playmakers are not there on offense on the perimeter, and they really don't have anyone that scares anyone, and that's the missing piece for UCLA right now going forward. You would think that they really need to get the Adoree Jacksons and the Juju Smiths to come to UCLA to make that run at a college football playoff as people are expecting out of Mora's regime. We're at about 4 to 5 games into the season. It's a 9-game conference season, Jack. Any surprises as we move into the next week before we get your picks and analysis of the games coming up this weekend? Your thoughts about this first half of season, any surprises out there for you?
Man, there's a ton of surprises. And it's funny, I would think I saw someone post on Twitter going into last week's games that Stanford had the best offense in the Pac-12 and Washington had the best defense. And I think nothing sums up how crazy of a year it's been than that statement. I mean, Stanford was a team that their offense last year and pretty much since they've lost Andrew Luck, it's kind of just been at best, a ground and pound offense that will hopefully get to 24 points, but because their defense can cover for them. And Washington lost almost their entire front seven from last year, and 4 guys going to the NFL on defense, and they still put up a really good the conference's best defense. And on top of that, you'd have to say the South and the North favorites going into the year were Oregon and USC, who I think what are their combined losses right now? They almost have 10 combined losses, and we're not even out of October yet. That's really surprising with both those programs. I think those are the big overall. I think those two things, the North and the South favorites, how tough September and October have been to them has been the biggest surprises to me.
All right, guys, we're coming up on week 9 here, and it doesn't look like a crucial week. There are no USC, UCLA games. There are no Oregon, Stanford games, nothing like that it's an obvious, okay, this is a make or break week. But at the same time, we know that if you take a collection of 6 games in the Pac-12, we're most likely going to get 1 upset, maybe 2, and that could completely ruin a season, especially in a situation where it's going to be so log-jammed, especially in the South as it stands right now. So why don't we run them down, and anything that jumps out to you guys, I want to provide, give you the opportunity to provide some analysis. So let's start with this. Oregon game at Arizona State with the Ducks coming in, Jack, as you mentioned, at 4-3, 2-2 in the Pac-12. Not the type territory that program is used to in recent years. Arizona State, same record at 4-3, 2-2. They've shown us the good, they've shown us the bad, a la UCLA there at Arizona State. So this should be an interesting one to eye to see if either one of these teams is better than marginal, maybe an upper tier Pac-12 team when we talk Oregon at Arizona State, Jack.
Yeah, this is a really interesting game to me. Because I think both teams have potential to go to be a lot better than they've looked, but they also have potential to kind of go back to the depths of not performing very well. I think we'll find out a lot in this game. With Oregon, everyone got excited when Vernon Adams, with the game he had against Washington, supposedly fully healthy. And I think Oregon kind of, let loose the reins to kind of play more of his style. And I think that caught Washington off guard. But we'll see, I think, Thursday whether or not that's going to be a long-term thing of if that's really going to be able to work in the Pac-12 or if that was kind of just, catching Washington off guard with Vernon Adams, and maybe that's not as big of a difference as we thought from that one game. And Arizona State, they seem to be a different team week to week. They got a really big, good attacking defense, but as we know, a lot of times that can hurt you when teams catch you in those attacks. So I don't know. I have no clue how this one's going to go. I feel like no matter what happens, I'd be like, okay, yeah, I believe that if you were to tell me. So yeah, I'm really interested in seeing what this plays out to be, and I think we'll learn a lot from what happens.
So are we holding off on your prediction for this one, Jack? What do you think? If you need to, hey, we'll catch it on Pacific Takes.
No, I'll go with my gut, which says Oregon still is a better team, but that's about as shaky as a pick if I've made all year.
Matt, we'll set you up here. Arizona State hosting Oregon should be a very entertaining game.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I really like Arizona State this week. That's also been a team that's just been up and down all year. Jack touched on it a few minutes ago, but one of the biggest surprises to me this year, I thought Oregon was going to win the North, and I thought because they have their system in place, and things just Chip Kelly might be gone, but the system, Mark Helfrich knows it, and things just keep going. They don't need 5-star athletes to have a really good offense. That turned out to not be the case this year. I mean, we've seen them really struggle on offense a couple of times. I can't remember the last time. It's been since the Pete Carroll era at USC that anybody's hammered Oregon in Autzen Stadium as bad as Utah did earlier this year. So I really like Arizona State in this matchup. I'm not saying Mark Helfrich is not a good coach, but I think Todd Bowles will certainly outcoach him in this game. I love the way Arizona State plays defense, kind of all or nothing on defense. They like to blitz a lot. And if there's anything I learned about Oregon this year, I do like Vernon Adams, but their offensive line has been less than stellar this year. We saw it against Michigan State. When they couldn't protect him, he had a less than stellar performance. Vernon Adams did. I think it's going to go a lot similar to the way that Michigan State-Oregon game went. I expect Arizona State to win, kind of going away this weekend. I think they're a 2.5-point favorite. I looked at it earlier. I would expect them to cover if I were a betting man. But I really like the way Arizona State matches up here against Oregon. And Oregon's defense this year has been downright awful. I mean, they've been completely disappointing. There's been certain guys that we thought were going to be big playmakers at the start of the year that just have not performed to the level that we expected. So I'm pretty confident in Arizona State this weekend against Oregon.
Okay, well, I want to mention here that Jack's at 47-14. I've got a little 2-game lead at this point at 49-12. Matt jumping in about week 3 at 31-8, and these are straight picks, all the Pac-12 games. So we've got USC taking on Cal. We see what the Trojans are capable of against Utah. We also see what the Trojans are capable of against Washington. They're going on the road to take on Jared Goff and company. The Cal Bears coming back down to earth a bit after the 5-0 start, 2-2 in the Pac-12, Jack.
Yeah, I really this is going to be another good one to me, kind of like you said, going into these games. A lot of sneaky good games. We're going to see if USC can continue that momentum that they built last week under Clay Helton. And I think if they can, I think this will be a good game for them. I think Cal is going to kind of, creep back down to earth. They got some nice things going for them, but they're putting too much on Jared Goff against good teams. And I think their system's gotten a lot better from where they came, and people need to remember that they were an absolute disaster 2 years ago. So them being what they are now is still really good, but I think this game in particular, I like USC to go up there and kind of continue that role under the the interim coach. As you see a lot of times with teams like talent that like they are due once they get that confidence back.
Haven't seen the line on this one, Matt, but I got to think that USC is a 7 or 8 point favorite even on the road at Cal.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the line is actually myself, but that I would say that sounds about right. I really like SC on the road at Cal this weekend. I liked Cal a lot coming into the year, and I liked what I saw early on in the year, especially from Jared Goff. But lately, after that Utah game, he threw, what was it, 5 interceptions or 5 or 6. He's kind of come back down to earth, and I don't think that's all on him by any means. I mean, they're struggling as a team. I think this will be a really entertaining game this weekend. I expect it to be really competitive, especially in the first half. Cal will come out with their hair on fire. They always play SC very tough, and they can score with anybody. And SC's shown they've got a lot of holes on defense this year. They're getting better, but it'll be interesting to see what they do defensively. I would like to point out, for anybody listening out there, if you're a USC fan or you don't know a lot about SC, I can tell you, Mark, out here on the West Coast, Justin Wilcox, the defensive coordinator for USC, has been under a lot of fire all year, even last year especially, for the very vanilla defensive schemes they run. They don't do a lot of attacking. They kind of just run their standard defense. They don't deviate much from it. If they do that this week and they aren't able to get pressure on Jared Goff, I think Cal has a real shot here. But I think at the end of the day, I think USC has too many athletes, especially outside. I think Adoree Jackson, you'll see he probably has a big game this week. And another name to look out for is Ronald Jones, as a freshman running back from Texas. He's been really lighting it up this year for SC. I think he's going to get the nod at running back to start this week because Trey Madden is still nursing an injury. So I look for Ronald Jones to have a big game this weekend running the ball especially. I think SC wins kind of going away here this weekend against Cal.
Okay, so USC actually about a 6-point favorite on the road at Cal, and as you mentioned, Matt, Arizona State about a 2.5-point pick by Vegas right now against the Oregon Ducks. Colorado breaks into the win column in the Pac-12 with a victory over Oregon State last week. The Buffs have a shot at postseason play at 4-4, 1-3 in the conference. Going to the Rose Bowl to take on UCLA, Jack. The Bruins come in at 2-2, still with a little bit of life, and they still have that Utah game in front of them. So they definitely have some life in the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, I think this is, I'm really happy for Colorado. That was a huge win for them last week. Hope they celebrated it because I don't think they're going to be able to put together a winning streak this year. I think UCLA, this should be a pretty a really good win for UCLA to kind of just, work some things out, even though they're banged up. And Colorado is, they got a pulse, but I think at home, this matchup just really favors UCLA, and they should hopefully be able to get healthy and not, pull it out too much. So that, yeah, there's not too much going on here to me.
Matt, I think I know where one's going, but just to place just a tinge of doubt in your mind, of course, Colorado took UCLA to overtime in Boulder last year.
Yes, they did, and I'd be willing to bet Colorado gets up for this game pretty good, especially coming off that win, and it's good for Colorado. 4 wins. I didn't see that, especially not after the first game this year was. I think they lost on the road to Hawaii, which was not a good team to lose to. But yeah, I'm with Jack here. I think especially coming off of that hammering that UCLA got on Thursday night against Stanford, Jim Moore will have those guys ready, and with or without their running back, his name's escaping me now. For UCLA, they're going to come out and hammer Colorado. It might be close a little early on, but especially a Jim Moore coach team, you're not going to see them lose that bad, and then come out flat the next week. So I think we're going to see UCLA really take it to Colorado this week. And just saw the spread's 21 points, so I think it could get ugly here for Colorado. But it's good that they've they're seemingly improving here, so that's a good sign for that program. But UCLA is going to take it to them this weekend.
Matt, you're only perpetuating the perception that Paul Perkins is the most underrated player in college football, or running back at least, when you can't come up with his name. And I know that you know his name and watch a ton of UCLA football. But you're right. In the public, looking at this matchup, UCLA-Colorado, I see where it opened at 18 and it's quickly jumped to 21. People loving the Bruins at home against Colorado. Another huge favorite, Jack, is, of course, Utah, bouncing back after the loss against USC. They're at home against Oregon State, a nice little 24-point favorite. And Oregon State showed me some things early in the year. Even though they got blown out on the scoreboard, they played Michigan close. They played a really good 2.5 quarters against Stanford at home before they wilted. But Oregon State seems to be unraveling at this point, Jack. They have to go to Utah.
Yeah, I think this is your classic very good team that just had a really frustrating loss coming home, and they're going to take it out on an overmatched opponent. Yeah, like you said, I think Oregon State, they have some nice things going on, and they're not completely hopeless. But I think Utah, coming off that loss to USC, getting back home, getting the team that they know they should beat and beat by a lot, I think that's going to be bad news for Oregon State. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if the Beavers can kind of do what they did against Stanford, or as you said, Michigan, where they can play tough with a tough team, but in the end, I think Utah is just too much, and Utah's going to be up for this game, and especially at home. So
anything to worry about here, Matt, for the Utes at home against Oregon State?
On paper, no, but I do want to slightly disagree with Jack a little bit. While I agree that's what should be the case, and I think Utah should come out and absolutely take it to Oregon State, this is a big game to me, just to get the kind of gauge the mindset of Utah here, because when you come off a loss that was that bad against USC, they look so good. Earlier this year, they had that huge one at Oregon. They get up, game days there for the Cal game, and even though their offense didn't do anything with all of the Jared Goff turnovers, found a way to win that game. And then to come to the Coliseum and just get beat that badly to a team that I know they're not afraid of USC. They're not intimidated by them at all. I wonder what the psyche is of this Utah team, and it should be interesting. I think, like I said, on paper they should win big here, but I'll be interested to see if they come out a little flat against Oregon State here, maybe off of that loss to USC. I think Utah wins, but I think it'll be closer than the spread would indicate for sure.
Defending Pac-12 South champion Arizona seemingly out of it at 2-3 now after the surprising loss against the Cougars, who have jumped out as a double-digit underdog a couple times this year now. Arizona at 5-3 going to Washington, Jack, to take on the Huskies.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting matchup of a team that has a great defense but no offense, and a team that has a good good offense but not much defense. So what will win out? Hard to predict, but I think at home with a late game that sounds like it's going to be pretty cold and rainy, with maybe Chris Peterson's first must-win game at Washington, in my opinion, because there's just not. This is one of the maybe the most winnable game left on Washington's schedule. I think Washington's going to have to come out fired up, ready to play in this game, and I think their defense should be able to create some turnovers. Last 2 weeks they played Stanford and Oregon, haven't created a turnover, even though they've been playing really well on defense. I think that's going to be the difference. And I think this game's not as important for Arizona. They really only need one more game, one more win to get the bowl eligibility, and they have a lot more chances. Whereas Washington, this is kind of like, you don't win this game, you're not going to a bowl. So I think Washington will be able to have enough to kind of get a slight edge in this one and coax a little bit of offense out of their offense and maybe get a defensive score or a special team score to kind of, give it a 2 or 3 point edge.
Hey, Matt, I know that you were locked in on the Washington performance at the Coliseum a couple weeks ago. Then they went to Stanford, and pretty much on point as you would expect. They struggled on offense, play tough defense, but the Cardinals so explosive on offense at this point, they gave up some big plays. Washington hosting Arizona.
I'm going to go with Washington here. I'm a little hesitant to do so. Their offense, even in the game where they upset USC, the quarterback play was atrocious. I know he's a true freshman, but they got to get a lot better there. Fortunately for Washington, they get to play Arizona this week, who's shown a lack of ability to play any defense, especially without Scooby Wright. So I do think what Jack said has a lot of validity to the fact that they need to win this game because it's a winnable game left on their schedule. And they, if they're going to get to a bowl game and if Chris Peterson is going to get things done here at Washington, they're going to have to win this game. So I will pick Washington. I noticed, oddly enough, they're a 5-point favorite, which really surprises me a little bit. But I think it's a really tight game. I think that'll be, for any Pac-12 fans out there, that'll be probably one of the more exciting football games itself to watch this weekend in the Pac-12. I think Washington narrowly pulls this game out, but I do think they win.
I know you guys are Pac-12 guys, obviously, but you're college football junkies. You watch games all over the country, keep up with as much as possible, kind of pull your hair out probably like me, trying to see as much as possible, and it's impossible to see everyone play, but you take in as much as you possibly can. Stanford, wow, what a run that they've gone on since the Northwestern game that's almost being dismissed a la Ohio State, Virginia Tech last season. Jack, just your thoughts about the Cardinal versus what do you see outside of the Pac-12 when you look at the elite teams, Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan State, Clemson, and what you see out of the Cardinal and what you could expect to see if they make a college football playoff, or do you think they're going to get there?
I really like Stanford nationally. I mean, obviously they got that loss, but I think they're just as good. They've shown just as much as a lot of the other teams up top, because I kind of feel like a lot of the high-ranked undefeated teams have struggled at times, including Ohio State, who I think is by far the most talented team in the country. So I think Stanford deserves to be with that pack, as kind of trading off with Alabama as the best one-loss team in the country. And what I really like about Stanford this year is that they have a good offense, because I feel like in the past few years they've relied on having a great lights-out defense and not having that great an offense. But the problem with that is you leave such margin for error if you have to, force your defense to hold someone to 17 points every week to win. So that's why they kept getting upset. This year, I think it's a lot easier for them to make up for, a slightly not as good defense with a much better offense. I think being able to, score back and forth with someone is a much better scheme than, okay, we gave up 3 scores. Damn, we're going to lose to Utah or Washington this week, even though we're a better team. I don't know if I can predict them to make it all the way to the playoff yet, because they're going to have to go undefeated. That's going to be tough, but I think they definitely can do it.
Hey, Matt, same question. Just looking at Stanford, I know you've seen the Cardinal a number of times, specifically against USC at a point coming off Northwestern when we thought, hey, this is still probably a good team, but it's a good 8-4 team. And then they have just exploded on offense, and these weekly 500- and 600-yard performances, sometimes against good defenses, they throw playmakers at us now, specifically Mr. McCaffrey, that they haven't in the past. Your thoughts about the Cardinal?
Well, first of all, if McCaffrey doesn't make it to New York for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, assuming he keeps up this run, of games. That'll be a total travesty. You know, nobody talks about them except I know you just brought it up, Mark, which is nice to hear. But that's not a nationally known name, at least not yet. But we're getting there. I really like Stanford this year. I think they will go undefeated, although I agree with Jack. It's going to be really tough from here on out. And I love the way they match up against a lot of these other high-ranked teams. I would say outside of maybe Ohio State and Alabama, I think they could match up really well with any of the other teams remaining. And this has just been one of those years. This is what makes college football so good. You know, Ohio State came in obviously with all the expectations this year, but nobody's really pulled away yet on the national scene. So Stanford absolutely looks like they're right in the mix with everybody else. And I would certainly have them in the college football playoff over a team like Baylor or TCU, where they don't schedule anybody and play any defense, but that's a whole other argument. I really think Stanford's absolutely a Final Four contender here, especially if they win out in the Pac-12.
Okay, guys, I'm going with Arizona State over Oregon. I'll take USC to win at Cal, UCLA over Colorado. Utah, of course, wins over Oregon State. I'll take Stanford, of course, as I'm guessing both of you are looking for the Cardinal to win against Washington State, although the Cougars playing very well and throwing the ball all over the yard as they typically do. And I'm going with Washington, as both of you are, against the Arizona Wildcats. So another interesting weekend of Pac-12 football. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. Matt Lozano of Rebel Media Group and also Jack Follman from Pacific Takes to break down the Pac-12. We come your way every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock Pacific time and 11 o'clock on the East Coast to break down the Pac-12. And the breakdown should get more and more interesting as we get down to the nitty-gritty of November and toward the Pac-12 championship game at Santa Clara. Guys, thanks so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you.
You bet. Have a great night.